Hi, it's Evie. Welcome. This is part two, moving from Oregon to Michigan. We actually did make it to our destination without any huge problems after that last one. And we went to Bloomfield Hills, which was a beautiful city. It was north of Detroit, and we lived there for 2 or 3 weeks. And when I kind of got rested from being on the road, I trekked out to walk up to the grocery store that was about probably a half a mile up the road. And there was a lady that was also in the corporate apartments, and she sees me walking by and she's like banging on her kitchen window over the sink. And I stopped and she opened it. She said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Oh, I'm walking up to the store." And she said, "Oh, it's dangerous. It's too dangerous to be out there walking." Well, it wasn't. I had seen bad areas, and this was not a bad area. Anyway, I walked to the store. It was fine. And now we had to look for a place to live that was going to be, semi-permanent. I didn't think we were going to be in Michigan forever, but we had to find an apartment or a house. The apartments were very expensive, and they were about 2 hours outside of Detroit, north of Detroit. And they were starting at about $1,200 a month, which was astronomical compared to paying $215 a month for rent. Big culture shock. I looked in the classified ads, with no cell phones. You had to stop and use a payphone once you went out and got the paper and started looking. A lot of places were already rented. A lot of places the deposit was too high. Sometimes as much as 3 months of rent they wanted for a deposit. I did find an older house built in the 40s in Taylor, Michigan, and it was less than 1,000 square feet. It was 900 and some. And it had a refrigerator in it, but the refrigerator ended up not working. So we bought this little short refrigerator that had the little ice box on the inside that, would fill up with ice. Anyway, it got us by. That's what we needed. It was interesting being in that neighborhood because there was only 2 neighbors that were even close to being friendly. I remember taking the trash out. We had to take it out to the street, on trash day, like probably do most places. So I'm carrying this bag of trash out, and I look to my left and I see the neighbor carrying a bag of trash out too. And it's a older gentleman, he's retired. I said, "Morning." And I mean, he hightailed it to the trash can, dumped that bag in, and walked super fast back to his house. Never said a word to me. And I was like, well, I didn't think I looked that dangerous. But I found that to be so true up there because I talked to everybody in the store, any kind of line I'm in, and people would just look at me. Very few people even spoke back to me. You would have thought I would have learned to stop talking to people, but I still haven't. I did find a doctor, which is very hard to do when you are about a month away from having a baby. Nobody wants to take on that risk. And I thought, what's the big deal? I've got my records with me. I had my paper records with me. But I did find an older doctor that worked out of a really old hospital, and he agreed to deliver my baby. So I had my baby. Staff at the hospital was really not very nice. Labor and delivery was, but the nurses on the floor where my room was were not nice at all. I had a bunch of stuff on my nightstand in the hospital that was like for taking care of the area that you just had the baby. And I woke up and I walked out to the reception, the nurse's station, and I said, "Hey, can somebody tell me how to use this stuff?" And the nurse turned around and she goes, "Just go back and read the directions on the containers that they come in." And I know I had to have a shocked look on my face, and I said, "Okay." And she goes, "And stay in your room. Don't be wandering the halls." All right then. So they kept me in the hospital for 3 days, and then I was able to go home, and everything everything kind of smoothed out once I had the baby and I got home. And I decided that I needed to find a job because we were not doing very well financially. I remember specifically one day I was driving our car, and it's a Honda, and there's an H in the middle of the steering wheel, and I thought, okay, we have money left over for groceries. And then seeing that H reminded me that I still had the car payment to make, which was $195. And I was horrified. That meant because I had $200, that meant I had $5 left. We ended up having to call my father-in-law, and he loaned us $500, which he said we didn't have to pay back. He was so nice. He said, you know, when a plane takes off, it goes down the runway and it slowly ascends up. And he said, that's all you need. Just need a little more fuel for going down the runway. Isn't that sweet? So anyway, we got over that hump, but I still needed to find work. So I applied for a job in a Honda car dealership that I think was 6 or 8 miles up the freeway in Inkster, Michigan. And that's how I got to work. I think I went to work, so I had the baby in November. I went to work in February, and I rode the bike from February until May, and I had enough money to buy a cash car. And I bought that cash car, and I drove it until we left Michigan, which was October of '87. October was when we found out that my husband was going to go to Texas for training, and we were supposed to move after, it was between 2.5 and 3 months of training, we were supposed to be relocated. So I went back to Oregon, I took the baby, and we drove back cross country by ourselves. And that was really a good experience, nothing like with the U-Haul. And what was really interesting were these truck drivers. The long distance truck drivers, I would be like out, pull over to a rest area or on a smaller like 2-lane road, pull off where it was safe to pull off to change a diaper. And always a truck driver would pull over with me. Now it took me about, I think it was 6 or 7 days to make the drive with the baby. We started out at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and then we stopped about the same time at night. And there was never the same truck driver, but there was always somebody that pulled over with me, and they waved, but we never spoke. Anyway, it felt safe to have somebody else pulled over waiting until you got a baby's diaper changed, and then on we went. Once I got to Oregon, it was great because I stayed at my in-laws' house, and they had a big 6-bedroom house and plenty of room for me. I did their laundry, I did all their cooking, and I was able to stay with my son after I had been working all those months. And we found out the best news. We were not going to have to move to Pennsylvania, which was where we were told we were going to move. We were going to get to move to Texas. So off I went to drive cross country again to Texas. 2 of my fondest memories from the trip from from Texas to Oregon is my son learned to walk on that trip. And he was so adorable. We were in a laundromat, and all of a sudden he just pushed off with a little chair, pulled his shoulders back, his chin was back, and he just started walking. Oh my gosh. I have a picture of it somewhere. He's wearing a Mickey Mouse sweatshirt. And then the other great memory I have is us going through the redwoods, which I've been through there many, many times. And every time I go through, I'm so amazed at how big those trees are. They are amazing. So big around and so tall. And we got to where my husband was. He was back in corporate apartments again. And we knocked on the apartment door. It was a weird feeling because I was like, I don't live here, but I know him. I know he's expecting me, but we were running a few hours late. It was around 5 p.m. and we were supposed to be there around 3, but there was so much construction. Our last day was from Amarillo to Plano, Texas, which is north of Dallas. So as I'm walking up to the door with my little boy, he's holding my hand walking. I didn't know whether to knock or walk in, so I knocked because I didn't want to startle him. And I'm glad I did because he was asleep on the couch waiting for us. He opened the door and he walks across the threshold and he's like, oh my gosh, my big guy, he can walk. And that was a great day. Then we went to sit down on the couch together and little one's running around. And I heard this like crashing noise, kind of a hollow crashing noise. And I said, what was that? And he goes, it was the ice maker. I said, what do you mean the ice maker? He goes, go look in the freezer. And I open it up and sure enough, there was a bin inside this, it was a 2-door. It wasn't like from the front serve like we all have now. I'd never seen an ice maker inside a refrigerator before. And there was ice. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to try this. Anyway, we made it to Texas, and that was 1988, I believe, the end of January of 1988. And I liked it, and I'm here all these years later. So we'll be 40 years in 2028, so that's a long time. Thanks for watching. I look forward to next time. Bye.